Welcome back to the Shadetree Garage, and I'm continuing my series of videos titled The Lessons I've Learned from the Cars I've Owned. Now this episode is about a car I owned, 1976 Plymouth Duster. Now actually this was a very special edition Plymouth Duster. This was called the Feather Duster. Now Plymouth had cute names for some of its dusters. There was the Gold Duster model, there was the Twister Duster, there were some other ones. A Space Duster that had a fold-down rear seat that extended the trunk all the way up into the passenger compartment. But the Feather Duster, again, this was 1976, immediately following the gas crisis of the mid-70s. And the Plymouth Duster was an effort to come up with a duster that would have high fuel economy. It had aluminum in the deck lid and the hood. It had an aluminum transmission housing, and all of this saved about 350 pounds over the normal Duster. And it was powered by a single barrel slant six. The engine was paired with a 4-speed overdrive transmission and highway gears in the rear end. So the engine you could run 75 miles an hour, and the engine would be barely loafing along. The car replaced the Volkswagen Type 3 fastback that was stolen, and it was much racier looking car. It was very attractive, bright red, and even the cheapy chrome hubcaps sparkled and shined on it. So the car had the tape stripe down the side, and it had Feather Duster as a emblem, not a hard metal emblem, but it was basically a tape of our vinyl lettering on the side. And the car ran and drove great. I loved it. Now, of course, anytime you have a kid, an 18-year-old or 19-year-old has a new car, you want to dress it up. It was flashy anyway. But I quickly saved up money and bought a set of Keystone Classic mag wheels for it. I got stock width for the front and a little bit wider for the rear. Now I wanted white letter tires, so I put 60 series white letter tires all the way around it with the wider 60 series tires on the back. Now fortunately there was a lot of room in the rear wheel well, and I did not get a deep dish rim, so the neutral, the zero offset, everything worked out great. There was no interference. The wide G60 tires on the back did not rub against the leaf spring suspension or the inside of the quarter panel wheel lip. Everything was good. Front tires the same. Everything, no interference at all. Anyway, I enjoyed driving the car, but one of the lessons you learn is that chrome does not add horsepower. And so the wheels made it look racy as heck, but at the stoplight derby, I wasn't going to win anything. Unless the guy next to me didn't know I was trying to race him. Then I might. So, but I still wanted to dress the car up as much as I could. And so I was able to buy a chrome valve cover for my slant six, which was a pretty rare item back in the day. And I also bought the chrome air breather that matched it, and put it on, and it helped dress up the engine compartment. Now the other part was that the under the hood on this Plymouth had been painted the same color as the body, bright red, and the paint was excellent, and I was able to wax the inner fenders. And now, not the firewall. The firewall was painted, but there were a lot of instructions. So painted that, and everything looked really sharp with the chrome in there. Very nice. Now I didn't add any other chrome. There really wasn't a lot of options for more chrome on the motor, but it was good enough. But it didn't add any speed, and I had some guys I went to school with give me a really hard time for the wheels and the chrome valve cover, And they would always tease me about, well, how much horsepower does that add? Well, none, and I knew that. Now, lesson 2 with my 76 Plymouth Duster, I had put some wide 60 series tires on the front and the back. Now, the 60 series are a much wider tire, and what I didn't take into account was that an abnormally wide tire, well, for one thing, it makes it difficult to parallel park. Trying to turn the wheel when you're not moving and without power steering could be a bear. But if you got rolling a little bit, you learn that, well, the friction's less. But I didn't take into account the wear on the wheel bearings that those extra wide tires were going to cause over time. Now, at that time, I was living in southern Indiana, working there. I had a girlfriend at the University of Kentucky, and then my parents lived in south central Kentucky. So I was crossing 2 states at least twice a weekend, sometimes 3. So I was putting a lot of miles on the car, and of course, a lot of miles meant a lot of stress on those wheel bearings on the front. And eventually, I had a wheel bearing fail, and I ended up welding an outer race to the spindle on the front end, and had to repair that. I had no idea how to do any of that, and I got some help to change that out. So I got a junkyard spindle and replaced it. And so then I, new wheel bearings. And I decided after that to go back to a normal, more factory width tire on the front. But also learned the importance of keeping wheel bearings regularly maintained, which I had not done up until then. And so after that point, periodically, every 40,000 miles or something, I would, if I had a good opportunity, I would repack the wheel bearings. Another lesson from my 76 Plymouth Duster was how to do brake jobs. The brakes began squealing on the front of my Plymouth, and so by that point I had a Chilton's manual on the car, and I could look up in the book how to do a brake job. Well, it looked pretty simple, and so I jacked it up and then took the wheels off and took the calipers off and found out, it was easy to do a brake job, especially with disc brakes. After I realized I had to take the top off the brake fluid reservoir, I was trying to push the piston in and it wouldn't go anywhere. Well, no wonder. So I took the top off the reservoir, and anyway, everything went fine. And a side effect of changing those pads so quickly was that my family learned I could change brakes. And so it seemed like periodically, from time to time, there'd be a weekend, and I'd get a call saying, can you put new brakes on so-and-so's car? So I happily did it. Didn't charge them a thing. They buy the parts. I provide the labor. The next lesson, and this was a hard lesson to learn and an expensive one. Do not believe every body shop sign that says they do professional work. Now I have to put professional in quotes. While driving my Duster, I had it parked in front of my house. Neighbor across the street backed into it. Crunched in the driver's door, damaged the rocker panel a little bit. And of course they had insurance and they took care of it. I got estimates. I'd gotten several estimates to repair the damage. And then I heard about a shop out where I live now. And that had a big sign, nude shop, new sign, said, and touted its professional quality. And the sign looked really good. So I stopped in and talked to the body man, and he looked at it and gave me a really good quote. So we were talking. I asked him about if he thought the paint would match. Now the Duster was bright red, and I kept it waxed weekly, and so it was bright red and shiny. And I was questioning whether the new paint, how well the new paint would match. So anyway, he said, "Well, it'll probably match." He said, but. And then he said, "Well, I'll give you a good deal on just repainting the whole car." Well, I'm like, wow, okay. So he priced it to me, and it was really a good price. just to go ahead and paint the car. Now, the rest of the car didn't need body work. It was pretty much a scuff and shoot deal. You just needed to scuff up the paint, and it was ready. There was no other body work to do. You might have to feather some chips or something, but maybe a door ding or two, but it was no major body work needed. So I left my car with him. He said he'd have it done in a couple of weeks, and almost immediately from the first or second day I'm working in Indiana, I get a call, and it's from a good friend of mine who lives nearby, and he tells me, he said, "Jimmy, I'm seeing your car driven all over town by this guy's wife, and he's got his 6 kids with him, and it's like they're hanging out of the car." It's didn't say he couldn't. He never asked me if he could use it, but he assumed I guess he could. So that first week, I got several reports from people that they were seeing my car around town. By the end of the first week, he had gone to the junkyard and gotten a different door. So it had a green door on it, and that was the only work he'd done. I got home that weekend, went out to see what was up, and he hadn't done a thing to the car except it now has a green door. So the next week I'm working in Indiana, and I get more phone calls reporting they're seeing his wife driving the car with all their kids in it all around town. Now the car, of course, had that white stripe, that signature white stripe on the side, and I'd already checked with the dealership, and I could get it, I could order it, which was great, and the Feather Duster stickers as well. So he asked me about painting the stripe on the side, and I told him, no, I do not want you to paint anything on the side. I'm going to get the factory tape stripe. So he understood that, and so I figured, well, he said it would be done the next weekend. So I got off work early that Friday, drove down, and found him spraying the car. He hadn't painted it yet all week. So I'll leave him alone and then go back out there Saturday. And Saturday afternoon, I go there in the shop, and he has taped off stripes on the side. And he is painting white paint on the stripes. Now, despite the fact that I had told him, do not paint the stripes, he was painting them anyway. Now, what's worse than the fact that he disobeyed a direct instruction? The stripes were horrible. The width went wider and got narrow and was wavy all the way down the side. And I thought, hopefully this will look better when he's done. And I had to give him the benefit of the doubt. Of course, I was an idiot. When I went back the next day to pick it up on Sunday, it looked worse than I ever imagined it would look. So quickly, the stripes were horrible. Now, on the tape stripe, it was an even width all the way back to the quarter panel, where over the rear wheel, the stripe widened and then came to a point right before the taillight panel. His were all over the place. Not only were they uneven, but when the flare wasn't anywhere close to the same contour, and the flare was uneven. It looked like a drunken sign painter had put this on the sides. Both sides were completely different, but both shared one factor. They looked like crap. They were awful. And it was embarrassing for me that I was going to have to drive this car in public with these crappy looking stripes on them. Now, I was young, dumb, and naive. I should have told this guy, I said, you sand those off. I can't drive it like that. I don't want those. I told you not to, and you did it anyway. I shouldn't pay you a damn cent for this job. Now, on closer inspection, I checked out the rest of the work he did. There was dry spray all around the rear window. It was dry spray to the point that it felt like 180 grit sandpaper. It was awful on both sides and around the top of the rear window. It was awful. It was red, but it was like red sandpaper. On the sides, now the hood and trunk were okay. Those weren't bad. The finish was decent on those. On the sides, all 4 wheel wells were were full of drips, and I mean drips off the wheel well opening, where paint had just sagged and then was dripping off the car. It wasn't just one or two or one little sag. It was all 4 wheel well openings had drips on them. And this was just unacceptable. The car got worse the more you look at it. And so then, again, closer detail. The Feather Duster stickers on each side, they never tried to remove them. They painted over the vinyl stickers that said Feather Duster. I couldn't believe that a guy that had the word professional on his body shop sign painted over vinyl decals. Now, I could get the vinyl decals. That was not a problem. I could get the tape stripe. He didn't have to paint that. But he should have removed the Feather Duster logo or emblem off each side and not painted the damn stripe. Now, you won't be surprised to learn that soon after I got my car back, his body shop closed. What do you think about that? And so I had to track him down at the place he was staying. So I tracked him down, and he was busy. He didn't want to talk to me. So his wife came out, and I showed her all the problems, and I wanted them fixed. And she said, well, so her fix on the wheel well opening, she said, well, you can go to Kmart or, Grant's or Kroger or whatever, and you can get that wheel well trim, the chrome trim you stick on. She said, I would just put that on. It would cover up the drips, and I think you'll be fine. She said, we'll do that for you if you buy the trim. I asked her about the dry spray. Well, it was a really hot day. I know, maybe you should have used a reducer that reflected that need for slower drying. The Feather Duster emblems, he did that so you'd know where to put the new ones. I mean, everything, there was an excuse, a reason for everything. And the next thing I found out was that they had replaced the door. For one thing, they hadn't painted the jambs of the door. The inside was still green. All right, so, and it gets worse. The door lock on that door, they didn't change it. They didn't install the one for my original door. So I had a door on the car that I had no key to, and it was the driver's door. So I asked him about that, and I said, well, what about, where's my original lock? It's in the door. Oh, well, honey, we threw that door away. Kidneys. Now, I should have sued their pants off, but I didn't. I just walked away from it, took it as a lesson, and walked away. Now, fast forward a few years, I've been experimenting with auto body painting repair, painted my sister's Oldsmobile, did dent repair on my father's car. So I decided that I would enroll at Ivy Tech, Indiana Vocational Technical College. They had a body shop and paint program. So I enrolled there, and one of the first jobs I did was to repaint that Duster. I hated that paint job with a passion. If I only had done one paint job during my years at Ivy Tech, it was going to be the Duster. I hated that paint job. I didn't even wash the car. I gave up. I wanted it to be dirty. I didn't want people to see what a crappy paint job I was driving. So I sanded it all down. I got the stickers off. I did sanded it down to metal in most cases, reprimed it. Anyway, I was trying to get it done pretty quickly, and I rushed it too much. I failed to sand it beyond like 320, and I decided to paint it with lacquer. My intent was to clear it. It came out okay, but I had a lot of sand scratches visible after it cured, and the paint kind of aged and shrunk, so I had a lot of sand scratches. So I really should have then gone back and just wet sanded it 400, 600, 800 and gotten it really smooth and repainted it, but I didn't. by a certain point, I would no longer, we didn't have shop time. You know, we couldn't bring our cars in, our projects in and work on them. So it just stayed there red lacquer. And so that leads me to my next lesson, is that 95% of a paint job is preparation. It really is. It really is. I fixed all the wrongs committed by that professional body shop. And my instructor at Ivy Tech had warned me that I really should sand, do another couple coats of primer and block it well, and to get the sanding scratches out of it. But I didn't, and that was my lesson I learned. So I kept the car more than 20 years, and the darn thing was having mechanical issues. I had to replace the rear end. So that brings me to my next lesson. The parts from one year of the same model to the next year of the same model may not bolt up, or they may not be the same. So I went to the junkyard and I got a rear end assembly, including leaf springs, for the 76 Plymouth Duster. And they found a compatible one and loaded it up, and I was done. Took it to my garage mechanic, who was going to install it, and he installed it, and then he ran into a problem. Yeah, I ran into a problem. The U-joint, the yoke on the rear end housing was a different size. Took a different size U-joint, and not the same size as the old one. So it was an earlier rear end. Anyway, he adapted it. He made it work. He was a kind of a car crafter, a shade tree mechanic of his own. So anyway, he got that fixed. Well, the next problem was he didn't have, my old rims didn't fit the rear wheels. That rear end was an earlier one that had a different Chrysler bolt pattern, and I had no rims to fit it. So I had to go to the junkyard again and find the early bolt pattern Chrysler rims and get tires mounted on that, and then after that I got the car back, and it drove fine until the transmission died, and I had to replace the transmission. And of course, finding a factory original 4-speed overdrive transmission for the Feather Duster was virtually impossible. I think they only made 2,500 or 3,000 of the cars anyway. So I ended up putting a 3-speed manual transmission back in it. Anyway, the car was, at a certain point, I had too many cars, and it was time to put the Duster up for sale. At this point, I had to carry 2 different spares. I had to have a spare for the rear bolt pattern and a spare for the front. So driving it was getting convoluted. And I had a pickup truck and I had other vehicles to drive that were more dependable, so I sold it. Now, the last lesson it taught me was don't depend on your car buyer to complete the transfer of the car you sell them. So I sold it to a young man who was a known, well, shall we say, abuser of certain pharmaceuticals. And so he paid me my $500 cash and drove off. And of course, I'd signed the back of the title, et cetera, et cetera. Well, he never completed that. And so he drove it on my tags, for a long time, even after the insurance lapsed or was removed. And so one morning about 3 a.m., I get a call from the sheriff's office. And I said, Jim, you've got a red Plymouth Duster that's out here blocking the highway here on Balltown Road. You're going to have to move it, or we're going to have to tow it. And I said, well, I sold that to John Doe, who was a frequent flyer with the police department. I sold it to him about 6 weeks ago. He apparently didn't complete the transfer. Well, no, he didn't. So I don't know what happened to it. I never saw it drive in town again. I strongly believe it was impounded and probably either sold at auction or had a one-way trip to the vehicle crusher. Anyway, it was kind of a sad end for a good car. I drove that car a couple 100,000 miles at least, and tried to take good care of it. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the Shade Tree Garage, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Please leave a comment below if to tell me what you learned from some of the cars you've owned, and share that with our community. If you like this video, please click the like button, and if you want to make sure you keep all the Shade Tree Garage content coming your way, please subscribe. All right, well, that'll do it. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time here in the Shade Tree Garage.